I'm going to talk about the Gothic Revival. First, I will tell you a definition of the term to help you understand this subject. Gothic Revival, also known as Neo-Gothic or Victorian Gothic, is an architectural style that drew its inspiration from medieval style of architecture inspired by the Gothic movement. In other words, it is an architectural movement which was to revive Gothic forms. This architectural style was popular between the late 18th century and the late 19th century. This architectural movement began in England during the 1740s. This movement occurred as the industrialization progressed in England, creating reactions against the use of machinery and advocating medievalism. The supporters of medievalism saw the pre-industrial model as a golden age. Several reasons can explain the change of movement from the neoclassicism to the Gothic revival, but some of these reasons can be seen as more important than others. The first is a growing interest in literary works to set their stories in medieval times that produced Gothic tales and romance. This setting helped to create a sense of nostalgia for that period. The second reason was writings from architectural theoreticians who were interested in using Gothic architectural features to their own times. The Gothic style became widespread in the third quarter of the 19th century. While the neoclassical style of the 18th century was associated with radical perspectives, the Gothic revival was associated with traditional such as conservatism and monarchy. The first manifestation of an interest in the medieval era were in the private domain, but around the 1820s some buildings were also designed in the Gothic model. The Neo-Gothic style distinguished himself with some obvious architectural elements. As we can see on this picture, they are numerous and I will present you some of them. First, the pointed arch. It is an arch which is a pointed apex. This type of arches can be found in most Gothic cathedrals and churches, rather than the rounded arches of Romanesque buildings. The pointed arch is used to accentuate the cathedral's height, and we can deduce that symbolically the arch pointed toward the sky. Then there are the lancet windows. It is a very high narrow windows, always much taller than they are wide. They are topped with sharp acute arches. That arch resembles the point of a spear is called a lancet. Another characteristic of the Gothic revival are steep gabled roof. It can be defined as a roof sloping downward from a central ridge so as to leave a gable at each end. Neo-Gothic houses, churches and buildings are also recognizable for other features. They are mainly composed of stone and brick structures with a vertical emphasis, a variety of colors and a lot of decorations. Another thing which was very important at that time was the symmetry. If you look at all the picture, we can see a lot of symmetry in the architectural elements like windows, roofs, sculptures. A.W.M. Pugin, full name Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin, was an English architect, designer, author, theorist, and a leading figure in the English Gothic revival. He worked from 1836 onward on the Houses of Parliament with Sir Charles Barry. As Barry was not an expert on Gothic detail, Pugin designed almost all of it, from the facades down to the inkstands. He also works on numerous designs on churches, houses, ironwork, and all sorts of furniture. His other finest works are the St Giles Church at Cheadle in Staffordshire, St Mary's Grange, the Nottingham Cathedral, and St Augustine's Church. Scott is another English architect, mainly remembered for his role in the Liverpool Cathedral. He became an apprentice to Temple Lushington Moore in 1899 for 3 years, and this period allowed him to develop his own architectural knowledge. He is well known for his blending of Gothic tradition with modernism. He decided to participate to the competition, designed for a 20th century cathedral, in 1902. But he was surprised to be one of the 5 architects selected for the second round of the competition, and even more surprised to win in 1903 at the age of 21 years. Because of his age and inexperience, it was decided that he should work with the architect George Frederick Bodley on the new cathedral, but their cooperation was not going well because their ideas were very different. Scott was on the verge of resigning when Bodley died in 1907. This event allowed Scott to continue alone, and he immediately redesigned more in the style he favored. The building of the cathedral lasted the whole of Scott's life, and he remained involved in the project until his death in 1960, refining the design as he went. He designed every aspect of the building down to the finest detail. The cathedral was consecrated in 1924 when the core and the first pair of transepts were completed. The tower was finished in 1942, but the first bay of the nave was not completed until 1961, after his death. This cathedral is the largest in the UK and the fifth largest in the world. It was finally finished in 1978, faithful to Scott's final design. Strawberry Hill House is a Gothic Revival mansion, situated in Twickenham, London. It is one of Britain's finest examples of the Gothic Revival for its architecture and interior decoration. At the beginning, it was a modest house, which was then transformed into a little Gothic castle by Horace Walpole, the son of England's first Prime Minister, who was an English writer and collector known for his novel The Castle of Otranto, published in 1764, which was the first Gothic novel in the English language and one of the earliest literary horror stories. Between 1747 and 1792, Walpole doubled its size and creates Gothic rooms, adds towers and battlements. Strawberry Hill was already a famous tourist site in its own days, and it has miraculously survived into ours. The Neo-Gothic movement also spread outside of England, in Europe, but also in other continents, like in France, the Cathédrale Notre-Dame, on the left side, situated in Rouen, was constructed from 1750 onwards. We can see clearly the Gothic elements of this cathedral. In the US, the Trinity Church of New York, on the right side, was created by Richard Upjohn, an American architect, in 1846. She is now part of the National Historic Landmark, thanks to its neo-Gothic architecture and her role in the history of the city. Thanks to its neo-Gothic architecture and her role in the history of the city.